I thought cleaning out Anton's car would be the hardest part of saying goodbye. I was wrong. Hidden beneath the spare tire in his trunk, I found a metal box that shattered everything I believed about our 15-year marriage. Inside were photos, documents, and a USB drive that revealed my husband wasn't just keeping secrets. He'd been living an entirely different life. And the woman staring back at me from those photos? She looked exactly like me.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're a subscriber, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you.
Tell us a duh. The rain drummed against the funeral home windows like impatient fingers, creating a rhythm that seemed to mock the silence in the nearly empty chapel. I sat in the front pew, my black dress absorbing what little warmth the October afternoon offered, staring at Anton's mahogany casket surrounded by a modest arrangement of lilies. Behind me, the vast expanse of empty wooden benches stretched like an accusation. 12 people. That's how many had come to mourn my husband of 15 years. The funeral director had prepared seating for 200. "We can move to a smaller room," he'd whispered earlier, his professional sympathy barely concealing his embarrassment at the sparse attendance. "Make it feel more intimate." I declined. The emptiness felt appropriate somehow, like the physical manifestation of how Anton had lived his final years. Isolated, withdrawn, and increasingly secretive. Even his death had been solitary. A heart attack in his office at 2:47 a.m. on a Wednesday. The cleaning crew had found him slumped over his desk the next morning, surrounded by scattered papers and his laptop still glowing with an Excel spreadsheet. The service dragged on with generic platitudes from Pastor Hayes, who'd met Anton exactly once during our hurried planning session. No one had volunteered to speak, not his brother Nicholas, who'd flown in from Portland but spent most of the service checking his phone. Not his business partner Kevin Armstrong, who'd mumbled condolences at the viewing but couldn't meet my eyes. Not even Ginger Holt, Anton's longtime secretary, who sat rigid in the third row wearing sunglasses despite the gloomy weather. Anton Denver was a devoted husband and successful businessman, Pastor Hayes intoned, reading from notes I'd hastily scribbled that morning. "He will be remembered for his dedication," and the pastor's voice faded into background noise as I studied the faces of the few people who'd bothered to show up. Anton's brother kept glancing at his watch. His business associates whispered among themselves during the eulogy. Even our next-door neighbors, an elderly couple who'd known us for a decade, seemed uncomfortable, as though they were attending a stranger's funeral. Maybe they were. The truth was, I'd been living with a stranger for months, maybe years. The Anton I'd married had been charming, ambitious, full of plans for our future. He'd talked about children, about traveling, about growing old together in the Victorian house we'd bought in Millbrook Heights. But somewhere along the way, that man had vanished, replaced by someone who worked 18-hour days, spoke in monosyllables at dinner, and treated our home like a hotel. "Would anyone like to share a memory?" Pastor Hayes asked, his hopeful expression scanning the sparse crowd. Silence. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. 15 years of marriage, and no one had a single story to tell, not one fond memory to share. The silence stretched until it became painful, and Pastor Hayes cleared his throat diplomatically. "Let us proceed with the final blessing." After the service, people filed past the casket in dutiful silence. Kevin Armstrong approached me, his expensive suit impeccable despite the emotional distance in his eyes. "I'm sorry for your loss, Adeline," he said, the words sounding rehearsed. He was very private about his personal life. "The office will handle any outstanding business matters." "What outstanding matters?" I asked, but Kevin was already moving away, eager to escape the conversation. Nicholas lingered just long enough to press a business card into my hand. "Call me if you need anything legal sorted out," he said briskly. But honestly, Adeline, I hadn't talked to Anton in over 2 years. We weren't close. One by one they disappeared into the rain, leaving me alone with my confusion and a growing sense of unease. The funeral director began his efficient cleanup, and I found myself standing in the empty parking lot, keys to Anton's BMW heavy in my palm. The car had been sitting in our driveway for 3 weeks, untouched since the night he died. I'd avoided it, just like I'd avoided going through his office or his side of the closet. But practical matters couldn't be postponed forever. The insurance company needed his personal effects. I needed to cancel his gym membership, his magazine subscriptions, all the mundane details that outlive a person. I slid into the driver's seat, inhaling the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with coffee and the leather cleaner he used religiously every Sunday. For a moment, I could almost pretend he was just running late, that he'd appear at the passenger door with his apologetic smile and some excuse about a client call. But the illusion shattered when I opened the glove compartment and found it completely empty. Not just organized, empty. No registration, no insurance cards, no random receipts or gas station napkins. Nothing. Anton had been obsessively neat, but this felt different, deliberate. I popped the trunk and began the methodical process of sorting through his belongings. A gym bag with unworn workout clothes, a briefcase containing client files I didn't recognize, a box of business cards for companies I'd never heard him mention. Everything seemed normal yet somehow wrong, like props in a play about someone else's life. It was when I lifted the trunk liner to check for anything underneath that my world tilted sideways. Hidden beneath the spare tire was a metal lockbox, the kind used for important documents. It was wedged carefully into the wheel well, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. My hands shook as I pulled it free, noting how heavy it was, how the metal showed signs of frequent handling despite being hidden. The box was locked, but Anton had always been predictable with his passwords and combinations. Our anniversary, 0824. The lock clicked open on my first try. Inside, my carefully constructed understanding of my marriage began to crumble.
Photographs. Dozens of them, printed on high-quality paper and organized chronologically in neat stacks. But these weren't family photos or business events. These were surveillance photos. Pictures of me leaving the house, shopping at the grocery store, meeting friends for lunch. Pictures taken from a distance with a telephoto lens, like I was a subject under investigation. Beneath the photos were documents, bank statements for accounts I'd never seen before, property deeds for addresses I didn't recognize, insurance policies naming beneficiaries I'd never heard of. And at the bottom of the box, wrapped in a cloth bag, was a USB drive labeled contingency in Anton's precise handwriting. My fingers trembled as I held the small device, understanding instinctively that whatever was on it would change everything. The parking lot around me seemed to fade away as I stared at the evidence of my husband's double life, finally comprehending why our marriage had felt like living with a ghost. Anton hadn't just been keeping secrets from me, he'd been watching me. I drove home in a trance, the lockbox beside me on the passenger seat like a ticking bomb. Every red light, every turn, felt surreal, as though I was moving through someone else's life. The familiar streets of Millbrook Heights looked different now, shadowed by the possibility that Anton had been watching me navigate them for who knows how long. Our Victorian house sat at the end of Maple Street, its cheerful yellow paint and white trim suddenly feeling like a facade. I'd always loved coming home to it, loved the wraparound porch where I'd spent countless evenings reading while Anton worked late. Now I wondered if those late nights had been real, or if he'd been somewhere nearby with a camera, documenting my solitary routine. I carried the box inside with the reverence of someone handling evidence, which I realized was exactly what I was doing. The living room felt too exposed, too open, so I climbed the stairs to Anton's office, a space I'd rarely entered during our marriage. He'd claimed he needed privacy for client calls, and I'd respected that boundary. Now I wondered what other boundaries I should have questioned. The office was exactly as he'd left it 3 weeks ago. His computer monitor still displayed the screensaver of our wedding photo, the only image of us together visible in the entire room. File cabinets lined one wall, their locks untouched by my previous hesitant attempts to sort through his business papers. His desk calendar showed appointments for the week he died, all written in his meticulous handwriting. I set the lockbox on his desk and opened it again, hoping somehow I'd misunderstood what I'd seen.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
But the photographs were still there, still showing me living my life while someone, my husband, watched from the shadows. The first photo was dated 18 months ago. I remembered the day clearly because it was my birthday, and I'd driven to the botanical gardens alone when Anton canceled our lunch plans for an emergency client meeting. In the photo, I was sitting on a bench near the rose garden, reading a book and looking peaceful despite my disappointment. The image was taken from at least 50 yards away, but the quality was professional. This wasn't casual photography. This was systematic surveillance. I spread the photos across his desk in chronological order, watching my own life unfold like a disturbing flipbook. There I was at the grocery store, at the gym, having coffee with my friend Aubrey at the cafe downtown. The photos captured mundane moments I'd forgotten, tying my shoe outside the post office, laughing at something on my phone while waiting for my car to be serviced, walking our neighbor's dog when they were out of town. What chilled me most was the intimate knowledge they revealed. Anton hadn't just been taking random pictures. He'd been documenting patterns. My Tuesday morning yoga classes, my monthly book club meetings, the route I took when I went jogging. Someone looking at these photos could predict my movements with frightening accuracy. The bank statements were equally disturbing. Account numbers I'd never seen, all in Anton's name alone, showing regular deposits that didn't match his business income. The amounts were significant, sometimes $5,000, sometimes 10, always in neat round numbers that suggested they weren't random payments. One statement caught my attention because it showed a withdrawal of $25,000 just 3 days before Anton died. The memo line read Final Payment ATU Services. I'd never heard of ATU Services, but something about those initials made my stomach clench with recognition I couldn't quite place. Among the property deeds was one that made me sit down hard in Anton's chair, a small house on the other side of town, purchased 2 years ago. According to the documents, he'd been paying utilities and property taxes on it regularly. A house I'd never known existed. The address was 847 Oakwood Drive. I grabbed the phone book from Anton's desk drawer and found the street on the city map. It was a quiet residential neighborhood, about 20 minutes away, the kind of area where young families bought starter homes. What was Anton doing with a house there? My hands were shaking now as I picked up the USB drive. Whatever was on it, I knew it would answer questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. But I'd come too far to stop now. I inserted it into Anton's computer and watched as files began to populate on the screen. The first folder was labeled Adeline_surveillance and contained hundreds of video files organized by date. My finger hovered over the mouse, paralyzed by the implications. These weren't just photos. Anton had been recording me. I clicked on a file from 6 months ago and watched myself making dinner in our kitchen, completely unaware that I was being filmed. The angle suggested the camera was positioned somewhere near the window, probably in the garden shed. Anton had insisted on building despite my protests that we didn't need the storage space. Another file showed me talking on the phone in our bedroom, the timestamp indicating it was taken just 2 months ago. I was laughing at something my sister had said, brushing my hair before bed, existing in what I'd believed was the privacy of my own home. The violation felt physical, like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart. The second folder made me gasp audibly, Genevieve_surveillance. Genevieve. I'd never heard Anton mention anyone by that name, but here was an entire folder dedicated to her. With trembling fingers, I opened the first video file. A woman who looked startlingly like me was getting out of a car in front of the house on Oakwood Drive. Same height, same build, similar hair color. She was younger, maybe late 20s to my 38. But the resemblance was unmistakable. She moved with a confidence I envied, keys in hand, walking up to the front door like she belonged there. Because I realized with growing horror, she did belong there. This wasn't just surveillance, this was Anton's other life. And Genevieve was his other wife. I watched 17 video files of Genevieve before my mind could fully process what I was seeing. She wasn't just visiting the house on Oakwood Drive. She was living there. The videos showed her bringing in groceries, tending to a small garden, hanging laundry on a line in the backyard. In one particularly devastating clip, she was painting what appeared to be a nursery, her movements careful and deliberate as she rolled soft yellow paint across the walls. She was pregnant. I rewound the video, studying her profile as she reached to paint the higher sections of the wall. There was no mistaking the gentle curve of her belly beneath the loose-fitting shirt. The timestamp showed this was recorded just 6 weeks ago, which meant she was probably in her second trimester now. My hands felt numb as I clicked through more files, each one revealing another piece of Anton's elaborate deception. There were videos of him arriving at the Oakwood house after work, embracing Genevieve on the front porch like any husband coming home to his wife. In one file, they were sitting together on the couch, her head on his shoulder as they watched television. In another, he was assembling what looked like a crib while she sat nearby, reading a book and occasionally offering guidance. The domesticity of it all made me physically ill. This wasn't an affair, this was a parallel marriage. While I was eating dinner alone 3 nights a week because Anton claimed he was working late, he was actually having dinner with another woman who was carrying his child. I opened the folder labeled Documents, and found the evidence that confirmed my worst fears. Marriage certificate dated 3 years ago, Nevada, Las Vegas. Anton Denver and Genevieve Hayes. 3 years, he'd been married to both of us simultaneously. The irony of her last name being Hayes, the same as our pastor, wasn't lost on me. While Pastor Hayes had been delivering generic platitudes about Anton's devotion to his wife, Anton's actual other wife had been sitting somewhere else entirely, probably grieving a man I'd never truly known. Birth certificate applications, ultrasound photos, prenatal appointment schedules, insurance policies naming Genevieve as the sole beneficiary. Anton hadn't just been leading a double life, he'd been building a future that didn't include me. Among the documents was a folder labeled Transition Plan. I opened it with the sick certainty that whatever was inside would explain everything. The first document was a detailed financial analysis of our assets. Anton had been methodically cataloging everything we owned together, our house, our joint accounts, my grandmother's jewelry that I'd inherited. But these weren't estate planning documents. They were exit strategies, notes about which assets could be liquidated quickly, which ones I might notice missing, and how to transfer maximum value to accounts I couldn't access. There was a timeline, written in Anton's precise handwriting. Phase 1, Establish Surveillance Protocol, Complete Phase 2, Secure Secondary, Residence and Alternate Identity. Complete Phase 3, Transfer Assets Gradually to Avoid Detection. In Progress Phase 4, Stage Believable Disappearance. Planned for December. He'd been planning to disappear in 2 months. While I was probably shopping for Christmas gifts and planning our annual holiday party, Anton was going to vanish from my life entirely, taking everything of value with him. But the most chilling document was a psychological profile of me, written in clinical language that made my skin crawl. Subject shows high trust levels and minimal suspicion. Rarely questions explanations for extended absences. Demonstrates strong attachment to routine and domestic stability. Low likelihood of pursuing aggressive legal action due to conflict avoidance personality traits. Optimal target for gradual asset extraction. Anton had been studying me like a lab rat, documenting my personality traits to better manipulate me. Every time I'd accepted his excuses about working late, every time I'd swallowed my hurt when he missed dinner again, every time I'd chosen peace over confrontation, he'd been taking notes, building a psychological profile to perfect his deception. There was more: bank routing numbers for accounts in states I'd never visited. Contact information for someone called Johnny Nupticut Document Services, with a Las Vegas area code. A floor plan of our house with my daily routines mapped out in red ink. When I left for work, when I came home, when I was most likely to be distracted or asleep. The most damning evidence was a series of emails between Anton and someone identified only as K.A. The messages were brief and businesslike, but their content was horrifying. AD. Target completely unaware. Timeline remains feasible. K.A. Excellent. Stage 3 transfer cleared. Secondary identity documents ready. AD. Minor complication. Target becoming more social lately. May need to accelerate timeline. K.A. Understood. Final extraction can be moved to November if necessary. K.A. had to be Kevin Armstrong, Anton's business partner. The man who'd avoided my eyes at the funeral, who'd been so eager to escape our conversation about outstanding business matters. He wasn't just Anton's partner, he was his accomplice. I sat back in Anton's chair, feeling like I was suffocating. This wasn't just betrayal, this was a carefully orchestrated theft of my entire life. Anton had been planning to take everything, our house, our savings, my inheritance, and disappear with his pregnant wife, while leaving me to discover the wreckage. But something had gone wrong. The heart attack had destroyed his timeline, left his elaborate plans incomplete. Instead of vanishing with everything, he died and left behind the evidence of his crimes. My phone buzzed with a text message, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. The number was unfamiliar, but the message made my blood freeze. I know you found the box. We need to talk. Meet me at Riverside Cafe tomorrow at 2 p.m. Come alone. Me nigh, Genevieve knew. Somehow Anton's other wife had discovered that I'd uncovered their secret. And now she wanted to meet. I stared at the message, my mind racing. How could she possibly know what I'd found? Had Anton told her about the surveillance system? Were there cameras I hadn't discovered yet, still recording my every move? I looked around Anton's office with new paranoia, scanning for hidden cameras, wondering if even now someone was watching me uncover the truth about my husband's double life. The funeral had been this morning. By tonight, Genevieve would be expecting me to respond to her message. The question was, what did she want? I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house settling, every whisper of wind against the windows, made me wonder if I was truly alone. The surveillance videos had shattered my sense of safety in my own home. How many cameras were there? Were they still recording? Was Genevieve watching me even now, the way Anton had for months? I spent the early morning hours methodically searching the house, looking for hidden cameras with the paranoid intensity of someone who'd just discovered their entire life was a lie. I found 3. One disguised as a smoke detector in our bedroom, one hidden in the kitchen backsplash behind a decorative tile, and one in the living room bookshelf, so perfectly concealed behind the spine of a fake book that I almost missed it. Anton had been watching me sleep, eat, relax, documenting my most private moments for reasons I still couldn't fully comprehend. I dismantled each camera with shaking hands, the tiny electronic devices feeling like physical violations. By noon, I had made my decision. I would meet Genevieve. I needed answers, and she was the only person left who might have them. But I wasn't going unprepared. I printed copies of the most damning evidence, the marriage certificates, the surveillance photos, the transition plan documents. I loaded everything onto a second USB drive and gave it to my friend Aubrey with instructions to take it to the police if I didn't call her by 6 p.m. It felt melodramatic, but nothing about this situation was normal. Riverside Cafe was a small, intimate place downtown that Anton and I had never visited together. As I walked through the door at exactly 2 p.m., I spotted her immediately. Genevieve sat at a corner table, her pregnancy more obvious now that I was seeing her in person rather than through surveillance footage. She was beautiful in a way that made my chest tighten, not because she looked like me, but because she looked like a younger, more vibrant version of what I might have been. She stood when she saw me, and I was struck by her composure. This wasn't a woman racked with grief over her husband's death. This was someone who had come here with a purpose. "Adeline," she said, extending her hand like we were meeting for a business lunch. "Thank you for coming." I didn't take her hand. "How did you know I found the box?" A slight smile played at the corners of her mouth. Anton was thorough about many things, but he wasn't the only one who understood technology. I've been monitoring his surveillance system since he installed it. The implication hit me like a physical blow. You knew. You knew he was watching me. I helped him set it up. Her voice was matter of fact, as though we were discussing the weather. "Please, sit down. We have a lot to discuss." I remained standing, fury building in my chest. You helped him spy on me. You watched him plan to steal my life, and you helped. Genevieve sighed, and placed her hands protectively over her belly. "It's more complicated than you think. Anton wasn't just my husband, Adeline. He was my assignment. You're what? Sit down, and I'll explain everything. But first, you need to understand that Anton Denver isn't really dead." The cafe seemed to tilt around me. I gripped the back of the chair to steady myself. "That's impossible. I saw his body. I buried him this morning." "You buried someone, yes, but it wasn't Anton." Genevieve's voice remained calm, professional. "My name isn't really Genevieve Hayes. It's Agent Genevieve Rochester, FBI Financial Crimes Division, and for the past 3 years, I've been working undercover to build a case against your husband and his money laundering operation." I sat down hard, my legs suddenly unable to support me. Money laundering. Anton's architecture firm was a front. He's been washing money for organized crime families for over a decade. The surveillance on you wasn't for a disappearance plan. It was because he suspected you might have discovered something. We think he was getting ready to eliminate you as a potential witness. The words seemed to come from a great distance. Eliminate me. Genevieve reached into her purse and pulled out a badge, setting it on the table between us. 3 weeks ago, we were planning to arrest Anton and several of his associates, but someone tipped him off. He staged his own death. The body in the morgue belongs to a homeless man who died of a drug overdose. Anton provided dental records that had been altered months in advance. I stared at the FBI badge, my mind struggling to process this new reality. So he's alive. Very much so. And extremely dangerous. The fact that you found his backup documentation means you're now a threat to his freedom. That's why I needed to contact you immediately. "The pregnancy," I said suddenly. "Is that real?" A shadow crossed her face. "That part wasn't part of my cover. Things became complicated during the investigation. But the baby isn't Anton's, if that's what you're wondering." I felt like I was drowning in revelations. How do I know you're telling the truth? How do I know this isn't just another layer of deception? Genevieve pulled out her phone and showed me a video. Anton, very much alive, was getting into a car at what looked like a private airstrip. The timestamp showed yesterday's date. We've been tracking him since he left the morgue 3 weeks ago. He's been moving between safe houses, accessing the money he's been stealing through your joint accounts. But we lost him yesterday. We think he's planning to leave the country permanently. Using my money, I said numbly. Your money, his client's money, and about $12 million that belongs to some very dangerous people who are also looking for him. Which is why we need your help. I looked at this woman, this federal agent, who had been living a lie almost as elaborate as the one I'd been living unknowingly. What kind of help? Anton will come back for you. He has to. You're the only person who can access certain accounts, and he needs that money to disappear permanently. When he does, we'll be ready. You want to use me as bait. I want to give you the chance to get your life back and put a very dangerous criminal behind bars. But Adeline, her voice became urgent, we don't have much time. Those people he stole from. They think you're his partner. They're coming for you whether we catch Anton or not. Through the cafe window, I saw a black sedan pull up across the street. 2 men in expensive suits got out, their eyes scanning the area with professional alertness.
Genevieve followed my gaze and cursed under her breath. We need to leave. Now, Genevieve. Grabbed my arm with surprising strength for someone in her condition. Back exit. Now. Who are those men? I whispered, but she was already pulling me through the cafe toward the kitchen. The kind of people who don't ask questions before they start breaking bones, she hissed, pushing through the swinging doors. Anton stole from the Kozlov family. They've been looking for him for weeks. The kitchen staff barely glanced up as we hurried past steaming pots and busy prep stations. Genevieve moved with the confidence of someone who'd planned escape routes in advance. We burst through the rear door into an alley where a nondescript Honda waited with the engine running. Get in, commanded a voice from the driver's seat. A man I didn't recognize, late 40s, graying beard, eyes that missed nothing. Agent Morrison, FBI, he said quickly as I hesitated. We need to move. I climbed into the back seat beside Genevieve just as shouts erupted from the cafe behind us. Through the rear window, I saw the 2 men from the sedan emerge from the building, their faces dark with frustration. They're going to search your house next, Morrison said, pulling smoothly into traffic. Whatever you need from there, forget it. You can't go back. This is insane, I said, my voice barely steady. Yesterday I was a widow. Today I'm running from the Russian mob because my husband faked his death after stealing millions of dollars. The Kozlovs aren't technically Russian, Genevieve corrected absently, checking her phone. They're Ukrainian, but that's not really the point right now. Morrison caught my eyes in the rear-view mirror. Mrs. Denver, I need you to understand something. Your husband has been planning this for years. The surveillance, the fake identity documents, the gradual asset transfers, it was all building to this moment. He knew eventually his crimes would catch up with him, so he created the perfect exit strategy. Which was what exactly? Stage his death, frame you as his accomplice, and disappear with everything while leaving you to deal with the consequences. Genevieve said grimly. The Kozlovs would have assumed you were his partner. They would have come after you for the money. By the time anyone figured out you were innocent, Anton would be untouchable in a non-extradition country. The car turned onto the highway heading out of town. Where are we going? Safe house, Morrison replied. Somewhere we can debrief you properly and plan our next move. What next move? You said he was gone, that you lost him. Genevieve shifted uncomfortably in her seat. That's where it gets complicated. Anton doesn't just need the money, he needs you to access it. Several of the accounts require dual authorization.
Your signature, your biometric data. He can't complete the transfers without you. So he'll come back, eventually. But we think he's going to try a different approach first. Morrison pulled off the highway at an exit I didn't recognize. The landscape was becoming rural, strip malls giving way to farmland and scattered houses. Different how? He's going to try to convince you he's innocent, Genevieve said. Think about it from his perspective. As far as he knows, you still believe he's dead. If he suddenly reappears with some story about being in hiding, about being framed, about needing your help to clear his name. The horrible logic of it hit me. He'll play the victim, make me think he needs my help. Exactly, and if you believe him, you'll give him access to everything voluntarily. Morrison turned down a gravel road, lined with tall pine trees. At the end sat a modest cabin that looked like it belonged to a hunting magazine. Home sweet home, he said dryly. As we walked toward the cabin, Genevieve touched my arm. Adeline, there's something else you need to know. About why I got so close to Anton during the investigation. I stopped walking. What do you mean? The pregnancy wasn't planned, but it wasn't an accident either. Anton drugged me at a conference 6 months ago. He needed leverage over me because he suspected I was getting too close to his operation. The revelation hit me like a slap. He assaulted you. He did what he needed to do to protect himself. That's who your husband really is. Not the charming man you married 15 years ago, but someone who would drug a federal agent to maintain his cover. Morrison had reached the cabin and was gesturing for us to hurry. Ladies, we need to get inside. I've got movement on the road. As we walked up the cabin steps, I turned back toward the gravel road, where dust was rising in the distance. A vehicle was approaching, still too far away to identify. Is that them? I asked. Genevieve checked her weapon, a gesture so practiced it was clearly routine. Could be the Kozlovs, could be Anton. Either way, we're about to find out just how much danger you're really in. The sound of the approaching engine grew louder, and I realized that my old life, my safe, predictable, boring life, was truly over. Whatever came next would be decided in the next few minutes. The vehicle that emerged from the dust cloud wasn't a black sedan or an unmarked government car. It was Anton's BMW, the same car I'd been cleaning out just yesterday. The car that should have been sitting in our driveway collecting autumn leaves. That's impossible, I breathed, watching through the cabin window as my supposedly dead husband parked calmly in front of the building. How did he find us? Morrison was already on his radio, speaking in rapid, clipped sentences to someone at headquarters. Genevieve had positioned herself by the side window, her service weapon drawn but held low. The surveillance system, she said grimly. He must have been monitoring us longer than we realized. He knew about this safe house. Through the windshield, I could see Anton clearly. He looked thinner than when I'd last seen him alive, his hair slightly longer, but unmistakably the man I'd been married to for 15 years. He sat in the car for a long moment, checking his phone, completely relaxed, as though he were simply arriving for a dinner party. Why isn't he getting out? I asked. Morrison finished his radio call and joined us at the window. Because he's not here to fight. He's here to negotiate. As if summoned by Morrison's words, Anton finally emerged from the car. He was wearing the navy suit I'd bought him for our anniversary last year, the one he said made him feel confident. The normalcy of it was more unsettling than if he'd appeared in disguise. He walked slowly toward the cabin, his hands visible and empty, stopping about 20 feet from the front door. Adeline, he called out, his voice carrying easily across the quiet clearing. I know you're in there. I know what they've told you about me. But I need you to hear my side of the story. Genevieve moved closer to the door. her weapon ready. Don't respond, she whispered. Let him talk. We're recording everything. I never wanted you to get caught up in this, Anton continued, his tone reasonable, almost pleading. Everything I did was to protect you, to protect us. Morrison had moved to the back of the cabin, presumably to coordinate with backup units, but I could see tension in his movements. This wasn't going according to their plan. The FBI agents in there with you, Anton called out. They haven't told you everything. They can't tell you everything because they're not authorized to make the deal I'm prepared to offer. What deal? I found myself asking, though I hadn't meant to speak. Genevieve shot me a sharp look, but Anton had heard my voice. Adeline, sweetheart, I can make all of this disappear. The Kozlovs, the federal investigation, everything. But I need your help to do it. Against Genevieve's urgent gestures, I moved closer to the door. You're supposed to be dead, Anton. I buried you this morning. A pause. Then incredibly, Anton laughed. The same warm laugh that had made me fall in love with him decades ago. I know how this looks. I know what they've shown you, but that body wasn't mine, Adeline. It was someone the Kozlovs killed to frame me. I've been in hiding ever since, trying to gather evidence to prove my innocence. The lie was so smooth, so believable, that for a moment I almost wanted to believe it. This was the Anton I remembered, charming, convincing, able to make the impossible sound reasonable. The surveillance videos, I said. The fake marriage certificate. How do you explain those? The videos were for our protection. I suspected someone was watching our house, so I set up security cameras. As for Genevieve, he paused, and I could hear the calculated nature of what came next. Agent Rochester approached me months ago, asking for my help with an undercover operation. Everything between us was part of her cover. Genevieve's face had gone white. He's lying, Adeline. Don't listen to him. But Anton wasn't finished. The pregnancy she's carrying. That's my child, yes. But not because of what she told you. We fell in love during the investigation. It complicated everything, but it was real. I stared at Genevieve, whose expression had shifted from confidence to something approaching panic. Is that true? No, she said quickly. Adeline, he's manipulating you the same way he's manipulated everyone else. Then explain the baby, Anton called out, somehow hearing our whispered conversation. Explain why Agent Rochester has been protecting me instead of arresting me. Explain why she's been helping me access your joint accounts. The words hit like physical blows. Morrison had returned from the back room, but his expression was troubled rather than confident. What accounts? I demanded. Genevieve wouldn't meet my eyes. Adeline, you have to trust me. Trust you? My voice was rising despite my efforts to stay calm. You've been lying to me from the moment we met. How do I know anything you've told me is true? Outside, Anton had moved closer to the cabin. Come out, Adeline. Let's talk face to face, like we used to. No weapons, no federal agents between us. Just the two people who promised to trust each other 15 years ago. Morrison grabbed my arm as I reached for the door handle. Mrs. Denver, if you go out there we can't protect you. Maybe, I said, looking between him and Genevieve. I don't need protection from my husband. Maybe I need protection from you. I stepped outside before Morrison or Genevieve could stop me, my heart hammering against my ribs. The afternoon air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the distant promise of winter. Anton stood exactly where I'd last seen him through the window, but up close, I could see the changes 3 weeks of supposed death had made. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, a tension in his shoulders that spoke of sleepless nights and constant vigilance. Hello, sweetheart, he said softly, and despite everything, the lies, the surveillance, the elaborate deception, my heart responded to the familiar warmth in his voice. Don't, I said, holding up my hand to stop him from coming closer. "Don't call me that. Not after what you've done." His expression shifted to one of wounded confusion, and I had to admire his acting ability. If I hadn't seen the evidence with my own eyes, I might have believed the performance. "What I've done, Adeline, what exactly do you think I've done?" "I found the lockbox in your car, Anton. The surveillance photos, the bank statements, the marriage certificate to Genevieve. I know about the house on Oakwood Drive. I know about the transition plan." For just a moment, so briefly I almost missed it, something cold flickered behind his eyes. Then the mask was back in place, the hurt confusion returned. "The lockbox," he said slowly, as though processing new information. "So that's how they convinced you. Adeline, I planted that evidence there myself." "What?" "I needed you to find it if something happened to me. I needed you to understand what I was really doing." He took a careful step closer, his hand still visible and empty. "Everything in that box was fabricated by the FBI to support Agent Rochester's cover story. The marriage certificate, the surveillance photos, they're all props in an elaborate undercover operation." Behind me I could hear Genevieve speaking urgently into her radio, but I couldn't make out the words. Anton seemed to notice it too, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "Then explain the videos," I said. "Explain watching you come home to her, helping her paint a nursery, assembling a crib." "I was maintaining her cover," he replied smoothly. "The Kozlovs had to believe we were really married, that she was really pregnant with my child. It was the only way to get close enough to gather the evidence the FBI needed." The explanation was so reasonable, so perfectly crafted, that I found myself wanting to believe it despite everything I'd discovered. This was why Anton had been so successful for so long. He made lies sound like truth, with an ease that was both impressive and terrifying. And the money? The accounts I never knew about. Payment for my cooperation with the investigation. The FBI has been compensating me for the risks I was taking, for the danger I was putting us in by helping them. A sound behind me made me turn. Morrison was emerging from the cabin, his weapon drawn but pointed at the ground. Genevieve followed, her face pale but determined. "That's enough?" Morrison called out. "Mr. Denver, you need to come with us now." Anton's expression hardened, the mask finally slipping completely. When he looked at Morrison, I saw the man who had planned to steal my life and disappear without a trace. "Agent Morrison," Anton said, his voice losing all warmth. "I wondered when you'd show yourself, still lying to innocent people about the nature of your operations." "The only lies here are coming from you," Morrison replied, moving to position himself between Anton and me. "Mrs. Denver, step away from your husband." "Husband?" Anton laughed bitterly. "Tell her, Morrison. Tell her what your investigation has really been about. Tell her why Agent Rochester is pregnant." Morrison's hesitation lasted only a fraction of a second, but it was enough. I saw uncertainty flicker across his face, and in that moment I realized that everyone had been lying to me. "Tell me what?" I demanded, turning to face Morrison and Genevieve. "Adeline," Genevieve said quietly, "there are things about this investigation that I couldn't tell you before, things that needed to remain classified." "What things?" Anton's laugh was harsh. "The baby she's carrying isn't mine, Adeline. It's Morrison's. They've been having an affair throughout this entire investigation. Everything they've told you about me, about this operation, it's all been a setup to cover their own misconduct." I stared at Morrison and Genevieve, watching their faces carefully. Morrison's hand had tightened on his weapon, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. Genevieve had gone completely still, her professional composure finally cracking. "Is that true?" I asked. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. "Jesus Christ," I whispered, backing away from all of them. "None of you are telling me the truth. None of you." That's when I heard the sound of multiple vehicles approaching fast, their engines growing louder by the second. Through the trees, I could see flashes of black metal and tinted glass. The Kozlovs had found us, and I was standing in the middle of a war zone, with no idea who to trust. The first gunshot shattered the afternoon silence, before any of us could react. Morrison dove behind his car, pulling Genevieve with him as bullets splintered the cabin's wooden siding. Anton grabbed my arm and yanked me toward a cluster of pine trees, his Federal Cooperation Act, immediately abandoned in favor of pure survival instinct. "Move," he shouted, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to life or death situations. 3 black SUVs had surrounded the clearing, disgorging men in dark clothing, who moved with military precision. These weren't the well-dressed negotiators from the cafe. These were executioners. "How many people did you steal from?" I gasped as we scrambled behind a fallen log. "Enough to make this personal," Anton replied grimly, checking his phone, "but not as many as they think." Morrison was returning fire from behind his vehicle, but he was clearly outgunned. Genevieve had her weapon drawn but was struggling to find cover that would protect her pregnancy. The tactical situation was rapidly deteriorating. There, Anton pointed toward a dirt trail that disappeared into the deeper woods. "We can make it if we move now." I stared at him in disbelief. "I'm not going anywhere with you. You can stay here and discuss your moral objections with the Ukrainian hit squad, or you can come with me and live long enough to hate me properly later. Your choice." Another volley of gunfire peppered the trees around us, close enough that I could smell the gunpowder. Through the chaos, I heard Morrison shout into his radio, "Officer down, need immediate backup at Eagle's Nest." But backup would take time we didn't have. I made my choice, and followed Anton into the woods. We ran through the pine forest in desperate silence, branches tearing at our clothes and pine needles crunching under our feet. Behind us the gunfire continued in sporadic bursts. Anton moved with surprising agility for someone who'd supposedly had a heart attack 3 weeks ago, navigating the terrain with the confidence of someone who'd planned this route in advance. "You knew this would happen," I panted as we crested a small hill. "You knew they'd find the safe house." "I knew Morrison was dirty," he corrected, pausing to catch his breath. "I just didn't know how dirty until today."
What do you mean?
Anton pulled out his phone and showed me a text message. "Package delivered to Eagle's Nest. Cleanup in progress. K.A. Kevin Armstrong." His business partner who'd avoided my eyes at the funeral, who'd been so eager to escape our conversation about outstanding business matters. "Kevin's been feeding information to the Kozlovs," Anton explained. "They've been using him to track my movements, my assets, everything. Morrison's been helping them in exchange for a cut of the recovered money." The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't want to see. So the FBI investigation is real, but Morrison's been sabotaging it from the inside. He's been using agency resources to locate the money for the Kozlovs while pretending to build a case against me. We started moving again, following what appeared to be an old hunting trail. The sound of gunfire had faded behind us, replaced by the ominous quiet of a forest that suddenly felt full of hidden watchers. "And Genevieve," Anton's expression darkened. "Agent Rochester is pregnant with Morrison's child, just like I said. But she's not corrupt, she's being blackmailed. Morrison's been holding her career and her baby's future hostage to ensure her cooperation." Despite everything, I felt a stab of sympathy for the woman I'd been ready to dismiss as another liar. "How do you know all this?" "Because I've been investigating them for months. The real money laundering operation isn't mine, Adeline, it's theirs. They've been using my business as a front while skimming money from federal investigations. I've been gathering evidence to expose them." We emerged from the trees into a small clearing, where an old pickup truck sat hidden under a camouflage tarp. Anton pulled away the covering and opened the driver's door. The surveillance on our house, I said, the final pieces clicking into place. You weren't planning to disappear, you were protecting me. Morrison suspected I was getting close to the truth. I knew they'd come after you to get to me, so I documented everything. Every threat, every attempt at intimidation. He started the engine, which turned over with surprising smoothness. The heart attack was real, by the way. Stress-induced, according to the doctor who treated me at the private clinic, but it gave me the perfect opportunity to fake my death and work from the shadows. I climbed into the passenger seat, my mind reeling from this newest version of the truth. The body at the morgue? A John Doe from the county morgue. Kevin arranged the switch. He thought he was helping me disappear, but I was really gathering evidence of his involvement in the trafficking operation. As we drove deeper into the wilderness, I tried to process everything I'd learned. My husband might not be the monster I'd thought he was, but he was still a man who'd let me believe he was dead, who'd put me through the agony of grief and betrayal for his own purposes. There's something else, Anton said quietly, something I haven't told you yet, about why Morrison really wants you dead. The truck hit a pothole, jarring me back to the immediate danger we were still in. What now? You're not just my wife, Adeline. You're my business partner. Legally speaking, you own half of everything, including the evidence that can destroy Morrison's operation and expose the real criminals. We drove in tense silence for 20 minutes before Anton pulled the truck into an abandoned gas station, its broken windows and rusted pumps testament to better times. He killed the engine and turned to face me fully for the first time since we'd entered the woods. I need you to see something, he said, pulling a tablet from under his seat, before you decide whether to trust me or turn me over to Morrison, assuming he's still alive. The tablet screen showed a video interface with dozens of files organized by date. Anton selected one from 2 months ago and pressed play. The footage showed Morrison in what appeared to be a hotel room, counting stacks of cash while speaking to someone off-camera. The audio was crystal clear. The Denver operation is getting too close, Morrison was saying. He's been asking questions about the Kozlov payments, cross-referencing them with our case files. We need to eliminate him before he connects us to the trafficking routes. A voice I recognized as Kevin Armstrong responded, "Can't we just transfer him? Get him off the case." "He's not on the case, you idiot. He is the case. We've been using his business to launder money for 3 years. If he talks to internal affairs, we're all going to prison." I felt sick watching my husband's business partner and a federal agent casually discuss murder. "How did you get this?" "I'd been suspicious of Kevin's new wealth for months," Anton explained. "Designer suits, expensive car, a house that cost 3 times what his architectural salary could afford. So I started recording our meetings, bugging his office. What I found was bigger than just embezzlement." He selected another video file. This one showed a warehouse I didn't recognize, where Morrison was coordinating the movement of shipping containers with men who definitely weren't federal agents. "They've been using FBI resources to run a human trafficking operation," Anton continued. "Bringing in workers from Eastern Europe under the pretense of immigration raids, then forcing them into labor contracts that are essentially slavery. The money gets laundered through legitimate businesses, including mine. You didn't know, not until 6 months ago. Kevin had been signing contracts in my name, using my business credentials to secure the deals. By the time I realized what was happening, we were already implicated up to our necks." He showed me document after document, shipping manifests with my forged signature, bank transfers authorized with my stolen business credentials, immigration documents bearing the letterhead of Denver and Armstrong Architecture. "That's why I had to disappear," Anton said. "Not to steal your money, but to gather enough evidence to expose them without ending up dead. They've been systematically destroying everyone who gets close to the truth. Then why didn't you tell me? Why let me think you were dead? Anton's expression grew pained. Because they were watching you too. Morrison had convinced his superiors that you were my partner in the money laundering scheme. If you'd known I was alive, if you'd started acting differently, or asking questions, they would have killed you to protect themselves. He pulled up another video, this one showing Morrison and Genevieve in what looked like a federal building office. Genevieve was crying, her pregnancy obvious even in the grainy footage. You'll keep quiet about what you've seen, Morrison was telling her, or your baby will grow up visiting mommy in federal prison. I can make the evidence disappear, but only if you play along. She was trying to protect you today, Anton continued. Trying to get you away from Morrison, before he could eliminate you permanently. But she couldn't tell you the truth, because he'd threatened to frame her for everything if she exposed him. I watched Genevieve's face on the screen, seeing the trapped desperation I'd missed during our confrontation at the cabin. The pregnancy isn't Morrison's, is it? No. That was just another lie, he told to discredit her if she ever tried to expose him. The father is another agent, someone Morrison had transferred to a dangerous assignment overseas when he found out about the relationship. The pieces of the puzzle were rearranging themselves again, forming a picture that was somehow both better and worse than what I'd believed before. My husband wasn't a criminal, but we were both targets of people far more dangerous than I'd imagined. There's more, Anton said, his voice growing urgent. The reason Morrison wants you dead isn't just to silence a witness, it's because of your grandmother's inheritance. What about it? The jewelry, the property, the trust fund. It's worth almost $2 million. But more importantly, it includes mineral rights to land in Montana that's sitting on a massive copper deposit. Morrison's been trying to gain access to those rights for months. My blood ran cold. The papers he wanted me to sign last month. The ones about updating beneficiaries on my inheritance accounts. If you'd signed them, he would have gained legal authority over your assets. When you refused, he decided it would be easier to eliminate you and claim the inheritance as evidence in a federal case. Through the cracked window of the gas station, I saw headlights approaching in the distance. Multiple vehicles, moving fast. They found us, Anton said grimly, starting the engine. Decision time, Adeline. Do you trust me enough to help finish this? The headlights were getting closer, and I could see now that they belonged to the same black SUVs from the cabin. What do you need me to do? Anton gunned the engine, and we peeled out of the gas station, gravel spraying behind us as the black SUVs closed the distance. In the side mirror, I could see muzzle flashes as our pursuers opened fire, their bullets sparking off the asphalt where our truck had been moments before. There's a storage unit about 5 miles ahead, Anton shouted over the engine noise, taking a hard right onto a dirt road that sent us bouncing through deep ruts. Everything we need to end this is there. What kind of everything? Evidence. Weapons. And a direct line to the only person in the FBI who isn't compromised. The truck's suspension screamed as we hit a particularly deep pothole, but Anton kept our speed up, navigating the rough terrain with the skill of someone who'd practiced this route. Behind us, the SUVs were struggling with the uneven ground, their lower clearance forcing them to slow down. How long have you been planning this? I asked, gripping the dashboard as we took another sharp turn. Since the day Kevin first tried to get me to sign those contracts. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know how deep it went until I started investigating. He glanced in the rearview mirror. Morrison's been planning to eliminate us for months. The only reason we're still alive is because he needed your signature on those inheritance documents first. We crested a hill, and I could see our destination ahead, a sprawling complex of storage units surrounded by a chain-link fence. Anton had a remote control clipped to the visor, and the main gate rolled open as we approached. Unit 247, he said, pulling up to a large garage-style door near the back of the complex. I've been stockpiling evidence there for 6 months. The storage unit contained more surveillance equipment than I'd seen outside of movies. Multiple computer monitors showed feeds from cameras I didn't recognize, and several large filing cabinets lined the walls. But what caught my attention immediately was the arsenal of weapons mounted on one wall. Jesus, Anton, what is this place? Insurance policy, he replied, moving quickly to one of the computers. I've been recording everything: Morrison's meetings, Kevin's phone calls, the Kozlov's operations. Enough evidence to bring down the entire network. He pulled up a file directory, showing hundreds of video and audio recordings, bank records, shipping manifests, and what looked like federal personnel files. The scope of the investigation was staggering. This is why I had to fake my death, Anton continued, typing rapidly. I needed them to think I was gone so they'd get careless, start communicating more openly, and it worked. On one of the monitors, I could see our black SUV pursuers spreading out around the storage facility's perimeter. They'd found us, but they were proceeding cautiously, probably uncertain about what kind of defenses we might have. Here, Anton said, handing me a cell phone. Speed dial 1 is Deputy Director Sarah Chen at FBI headquarters. She's been running a parallel investigation into Morrison's unit. Tell her Blackbird is active and give her these coordinates. Blackbird, my code name for this operation. She'll know what it means. I dialed the number, while Anton began pulling equipment from various cabinets. The phone was answered on the second ring. Chen, Deputy Director, this is Adeline Denver. My husband said to tell you Blackbird is active. I rattled off the coordinates Anton had written on a piece of paper. A pause. Mrs. Denver, we've been looking for you. Are you safe? Define safe. We're at a storage facility surrounded by people trying to kill us, but apparently that's an improvement over this morning. Agent Morrison reported that you'd been kidnapped by your husband and were in extreme danger. Agent Morrison is the danger. He's been working with the people who want us dead. Another pause, longer this time. Mrs. Denver, I need you to listen carefully. We've had Morrison under investigation for 3 months. Can you confirm your husband is alive and has evidence of Morrison's activities? I looked at Anton, who was now wearing a tactical vest and checking the magazine on a pistol. Yes to both. Excellent. Federal backup is en route to your location ETA 12 minutes. Can you hold out that long? Through the security monitors, I could see armed figures moving between the storage units, getting closer to our position. I guess we're about to find out. Mrs. Denver, one more thing. The agent you know is Genevieve Rochester. She's been working with us to gather evidence against Morrison. Whatever she told you about being blackmailed, it was part of her cover to protect the investigation. I felt a wave of relief mixed with frustration. So she was never really pregnant. Oh, she's pregnant. But the father is Agent Collins from our cybercrime unit, not Morrison. They've been married for 2 years. Anton had moved to a control panel and was activating what appeared to be external security measures. Floodlights blazed to life around the storage facility, and I could hear the whine of electric motors. What's happening? Lockdown protocol, he said grimly. This place has more security than Fort Knox. They can't get in easily, but we can't get out either. How long until backup arrives? 11 minutes. Outside, automatic weapons fire erupted as our attackers encountered Anton's defensive measures. This was going to be the longest 11 minutes of my life. The first explosion shook the entire storage unit, sending Anton's carefully organized files cascading to the floor. On the security monitors, I watched the Kozlov team systematically destroying the perimeter defenses with military-grade explosives. They're not playing around, Anton muttered, switching to a different camera feed that showed 3 more vehicles arriving at the facility's entrance. Looks like Morrison called in the full crew. How many people are we talking about? 15, maybe 20, all armed, all professional. He handed me a bulletproof vest and a pistol. Do you remember how to use this? I thought of the shooting lessons he'd insisted we take during our 2nd year of marriage, back when we talked about maybe moving to a more rural area. Point and squeeze, don't pull. Good enough. Another explosion, closer this time. The lights flickered, and several of the monitors went dark. Through the remaining cameras, I could see figures in tactical gear moving systematically through the storage facility, clearing each unit with practiced efficiency.
Unit 247 is at the back, I realized. They're going to take their time, make sure we can't escape. That's what I'm counting on, Anton said, his fingers flying over a keyboard. The longer they take, the better chance Chen's people have of getting here. What are you doing? Uploading everything to a secure federal server. Even if they kill us both, the evidence will survive. He glanced at a progress bar showing 73% complete. But we need to buy another few minutes. The sound of cutting equipment reached us through the walls. They were working on the main door, probably using industrial tools to get through Anton's reinforced security measures. There's something I need to tell you, I said, surprising myself with how calm my voice sounded. About why I never questioned your late nights, your business trips, all the times you seemed distant. Anton looked up from the computer. Adeline, this isn't the time, it is the time. I need you to know that I knew something was wrong. I just chose not to dig deeper, because I was afraid of what I'd find. The cutting sounds grew louder, accompanied by the acrid smell of burning metal. I thought you were having an affair, I continued. I thought if I just ignored it, maybe it would go away, and we could go back to being happy. I was a coward. You weren't a coward. You were trying to protect yourself. The upload progress hit 89%. And you were right to be careful. If you'd started investigating, Morrison would have killed you months ago. But I could have helped you. Instead, I left you to handle all of this alone. Anton crossed the small space between us and took my hands. Adeline, listen to me. You saved my life by not getting involved. The only reason I'm still alive is because Morrison believed you were innocent, that you didn't know anything about the operation. 95% complete. A section of the main door suddenly glowed cherry red as whatever they were using to cut through finally made progress. We had maybe 2 minutes before they breached the entrance. There's a back exit, Anton said, moving to what looked like a solid wall but which swung open to reveal a narrow tunnel. It leads to the drainage system under the facility. Where does it come out? About a quarter mile from here, in the woods behind the county maintenance building. 98% complete. What about the evidence? What about finishing this? The upload will complete automatically. Chen will have everything she needs to arrest Morrison and shut down the trafficking operation. He shouldered a backpack filled with hard drives and documents. But we need to be alive to testify. 99% complete. The main door burst open in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Tactical lights pierced the darkness as armed figures poured into the storage unit. Federal agents, someone shouted. Drop your weapons. But these weren't federal agents. I could see the Kozlov tattoos on the arms of the men entering the unit, the same markings I'd noticed in Anton's surveillance photos. 100% complete. Go. Anton pushed me toward the tunnel entrance, firing several shots to keep the attackers back. I'll be right behind you. I crawled into the narrow space, my heart hammering as gunfire erupted behind me. The tunnel was barely wide enough for my shoulders,
and I had to fight down waves of claustrophobia as I pulled myself forward through the darkness. Behind me, I heard Anton's voice. "Everything's uploaded. You're too late." More gunfire, a scream that might have been Anton's. Then silence. I kept crawling, tears streaming down my face, following the faint current of air that promised an exit somewhere ahead. The tunnel seemed to stretch forever, and with each painful inch forward, I wondered if I was crawling toward freedom or just delaying the inevitable. When I finally saw light ahead, I realized I'd been holding my breath for what felt like hours. I emerged from the drainage pipe into bright afternoon sunlight, immediately spotting the federal vehicles racing toward the storage facility in the distance. But Anton wasn't behind me, and I had no idea if he was still alive. I stumbled out of the drainage pipe into a world that felt surreal after the claustrophobic darkness of the tunnel. Federal vehicles were converging on the storage facility from 3 directions, their sirens creating a symphony of approaching justice. But all I could think about was the silence that had followed Anton's last words. My phone buzzed. "Deputy Director Chen. Mrs. Denver, what's your status?" "I'm out, but Anton." My voice broke. "I think they got him. Stay where you are. Agent Rodriguez is 2 minutes from your position. We're going in now." Through the trees, I could see the storage facility, surrounded by federal vehicles. Tactical teams were moving with precision, but I knew they might be too late. The upload had completed. Chen would have all the evidence she needed to destroy Morrison's operation. But at what cost? A black SUV approached through the maintenance road, and I tensed before recognizing the FBI markings. A Latina woman in tactical gear emerged, her weapon drawn but pointed down. "Adeline Denver." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Agent Rodriguez. Deputy Director Chen sent me to extract you." She helped me into the vehicle. "Medical's standing by if you need attention." "I'm fine. What about my husband?" Rodriguez spoke into her radio as we drove toward the storage facility. "Eagle 1, do we have status on the male subject?" The response crackled through static. "Negative, still clearing the facility." Heavy resistance. My heart sank. The longer it took to find Anton, the less likely it was that he'd survived. We pulled up to a command post that had been established in the facility's parking lot. Deputy Director Chen was a compact woman in her 50s whose presence immediately commanded respect. She approached our vehicle as I got out. "Mrs. Denver, I'm Sarah Chen. First, let me say how sorry I am that you've been put through this ordeal." "Is he alive?" Chen's expression was carefully neutral. "We're still conducting the operation. But I want you to know that your husband's work over the past 6 months has been invaluable. The evidence he gathered has given us everything we need to dismantle one of the largest human trafficking networks on the East Coast." "I don't care about the network. I care about Anton." "I understand. But I need you to know that Agent Morrison and his accomplices are in federal custody. Kevin Armstrong was arrested at his office an hour ago. The immediate threat to your life is over." A commotion near the storage facility caught our attention. Tactical officers were emerging from the building, escorting several men in zip-tie restraints. I scanned their faces desperately, but Anton wasn't among them. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said, pressing a hand to her earpiece. "They found something." Chen grabbed her radio. "Talk to me." "We found a blood trail leading from Unit 247 to the back of the facility. Looks like someone was dragged or carried. And ma'am, we found Agent Rochester." My stomach clenched. "Genevieve? She's alive, conscious, asking for Mrs. Denver." Chen looked at me. "Are you up for this?" I nodded, and we walked quickly toward an ambulance where Genevieve sat on the back bumper, a paramedic checking her vital signs. She looked pale but alert, her hand protectively covering her belly. "Adeline, she said when she saw me. "Thank God you're safe. Where's Anton?" "They took him." Her voice was tight with pain, though whether physical or emotional I couldn't tell. Morrison had backup plans within backup plans. When the upload completed and he realized the evidence was compromised, he ordered them to extract Anton alive. Why alive? Because they need him to testify that he was the one running the money laundering operation. Morrison's going to try to pin everything on Anton and claim he was a deep cover agent who got too close to his target. Chen cursed under her breath. "Do you know where they took him?" "I overheard them talking about a boat. Something about international waters and a handoff to the Kozlov's people." Rodriguez was already on her radio, coordinating with Coast Guard and state police. But I could see in Chen's expression that time was critical. Once they got Anton onto international waters, the jurisdiction became murky and rescue exponentially more difficult. "There's something else," Genevieve continued. "Morrison isn't just dirty, he's desperate. His gambling debts to the Kozlovs are what started this whole thing. He's been stealing from federal seizure accounts to pay them back, but it's never enough. Taking down Anton's operation was supposed to be his way out. How much does he owe them?" $12 million, plus interest. Chen closed her eyes briefly. "So if he can't deliver Anton as a scapegoat, they'll kill Morrison too. Which means he'll do anything to make sure Anton doesn't survive to tell the truth." Through the radio chatter, I heard the Coast Guard reporting a suspicious vessel leaving Baltimore Harbor at high speed, heading for international waters. "That's them," Chen said grimly. "We've got maybe an hour before they reach the 12-mile limit." The race was on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that even if we reached the boat in time, Morrison would have already made sure that Anton couldn't expose the truth about who the real criminals were. Part 13. The chase. The Coast Guard helicopter lifted off from the Baltimore field office 27 minutes after we'd received the coordinates. I sat strapped into a jump seat, wearing a tactical vest that felt surreal against my civilian clothes, watching the Maryland coastline streak past below us. Chen had tried to convince me to stay behind, but I'd refused to let Anton face whatever was coming alone. Target vessel is a 60-foot fishing boat, the Maria Elena, the pilot announced through our headsets. Radar shows she's making 22 knots toward international waters. ETA to intercept 8 minutes. Agent Rodriguez sat across from me, checking her equipment with practiced efficiency. Beside her, a Coast Guard rescue swimmer named Petty Officer Martinez was preparing diving gear that I hoped we wouldn't need. "Mrs. Denver," Chen said, her voice crackling through the comm system. "When we reach the vessel, you stay with the helicopter. This is a tactical operation now." I nodded, but privately I knew that if Anton was on that boat, nothing would keep me from getting to him. Through the helicopter's window, I could see the Maria Elena ahead, a commercial fishing vessel that had been modified with additional antennas and what looked like reinforced deck structures. It was moving fast for its size, leaving a distinctive wake as it raced toward the invisible line that would put it beyond U.S. jurisdiction. "Coast Guard cutter Vigilant is moving to intercept from the north," the pilot reported. "State police helicopter is coming in from the west. We're boxing them in." But even as he spoke, I could see the boat was going to be close. The 12-mile limit was just minutes away, and international maritime law would make any rescue operation exponentially more complicated. There, Rodriguez pointed toward the boat's deck. Movement near the stern. Through binoculars, I could make out figures on the boat's deck. 2 men in dark clothing, and between them Anton. Even from this distance, I could see he was injured, supported by his captors rather than walking freely. "He's alive," Chen said grimly. "But not for long if they reach international waters." The helicopter pilot's voice was urgent. Coast Guard Vigilant is moving to intercept, but the target vessel is refusing to heave to. They're requesting permission to fire warning shots. Negative, Chen responded immediately. Hostage on board. Do not fire unless fired upon. I watched through the binoculars as one of the figures on the boat's deck raised what looked like a satellite phone. Within seconds, Chen's radio crackled with an incoming transmission. Federal agents, this is Agent Morrison aboard the Maria Elena. I am conducting a lawful federal operation in pursuit of a dangerous fugitive. Stand down immediately. Chen grabbed the radio. Morrison, this is Deputy Director Chen. You are under arrest for conspiracy, money laundering, and human trafficking. Order your vessel to stop immediately. Chen, you don't understand the situation. Anton Denver is a deep cover asset who's gone rogue. I'm extracting him for debriefing before he compromises ongoing operations. The only thing being compromised here is your freedom. We have all the evidence, Morrison. Your operation is blown. A pause, then Morrison's voice, stripped of its professional calm. You have nothing. And in about 3 minutes you'll be out of jurisdiction. Through the binoculars, I saw one of the figures on deck, Morrison himself, approach Anton with what looked like a briefcase. Even from this distance, the threat was clear. He's going to kill him, I said, my voice cutting through the radio chatter. Chen was coordinating with the Coast Guard cutter, but I could see we were running out of time. The Maria Elena was less than a mile from international waters, and once it crossed that line, any rescue operation would require diplomatic coordination that could take hours. Mrs. Denver, Martinez said suddenly, can you swim? I stared at him. What? The water's rough but manageable. If we fast rope down to the boat before it reaches the limit, we might be able to create enough confusion for the cutter to close distance. Chen spun around. Absolutely not, Mrs. Denver is a civilian. Mrs. Denver is also the only person on this helicopter that Anton will trust completely, Martinez countered. If we can get her on that boat, she might be able to buy us the time we need. The pilot's voice cut through our debate. 2 minutes to international waters. Coast Guard cutter is still 90 seconds out. I looked down at the boat, where Anton was now clearly visible as a prisoner. Morrison stood beside him, the briefcase open in his hands. Whatever was inside, it was meant for my husband. Do it, I said. Adeline, Chen started. He's my husband. And if Morrison kills him out there, he'll claim Anton was a rogue agent who died resisting arrest. No one will ever know the truth. Martinez was already attaching a repelling harness to my vest. 30 seconds to the deck. Stay low, move fast, and whatever happens, don't let them get you near the rail. The helicopter banked sharply toward the Maria Elena, and I could see armed figures on deck turning toward us, weapons raised. We were about to find out just how far Morrison was willing to go to protect his secret. The rope burned through my gloves as I rappelled toward the Maria Elena's deck, the helicopter's rotors creating a whirlwind of spray and noise that made communication impossible. Below me, I could see Morrison shouting orders to his men, one of whom was raising an assault rifle toward the helicopter. Martinez hit the deck first, rolling behind a stack of fishing nets as bullets sparked off the metal around him. I landed hard, my knees buckling, but managed to scramble toward the boat's superstructure before the gunfire found me. Adeline, Anton's voice cut through the chaos. He was zip-tied to a chair near the stern, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead, but his eyes were alert and focused on me with a mixture of relief and terror. Morrison stood beside him, no longer the composed federal agent but a desperate man with nothing left to lose. In his hand was a pistol pointed directly at Anton's head. That's far enough, Morrison shouted over the helicopter noise. 1 step closer and your husband dies. I froze, acutely aware that we were still moving toward international waters. Through the spray, I could see the Coast Guard cutter racing to intercept us, but it was going to be close. "Let him go, Morrison," I called back. "It's over. Chen has all the evidence. Evidence can be discredited. Witnesses can be eliminated." Morrison's face was flushed with desperation and rage. "But not if Denver talks. Not if he tells them how deep this really goes." Martinez had taken cover behind the boat's wheelhouse and was speaking urgently into his radio. I could see the Coast Guard helicopter maneuvering for a better position, but Morrison's men had positioned themselves well, using Anton as a human shield while maintaining overlapping fields of fire. "You don't understand," Morrison continued, his voice cracking with strain. "This isn't just about money laundering. The trafficking operation goes all the way to the top. Senators, federal judges, people who could destroy entire agencies if their involvement comes out." "Then testify," I shouted back. "Make a deal. Cooperate with the investigation." Morrison laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "You think they'll let me live long enough to testify? You think the Kozlovs are the only ones who want me dead?" The boat's engines suddenly roared louder, and I felt our speed increase. Whoever was piloting the vessel was making a final desperate run for international waters. 90 seconds, someone shouted from the wheelhouse. Morrison's grip on his weapon tightened. 90 seconds until this becomes someone else's problem. That's when Anton spoke, his voice calm despite his circumstances. "Adeline, the briefcase. Look at what's in the briefcase." I followed his gaze to the open case at Morrison's feet. Inside were what looked like explosive devices, blocks of plastic explosive with digital timers, already counting down. "Jesus Christ, Morrison," Martinez had seen it too. "You're going to blow the boat." "Insurance policy," Morrison replied. "If I can't reach international waters, no one survives to tell the story. The official report will say that Denver and his accomplices died in a terrorist attack while trying to escape federal custody." The timers showed less than 2 minutes. Through my earpiece I heard Chen's voice. "All units, target vessel has explosives on board." Repeat, "Explosives on board. Abort direct assault." But aborting wasn't an option. In 90 seconds we'd be in international waters where a rescue operation would be nearly impossible. In 2 minutes, Morrison would detonate the explosives and eliminate all the witnesses to his crimes. I made a decision that would have seemed impossible just 48 hours ago. "Morrison," I called out slowly, standing up from my cover behind equipment locker. "I'll make you a deal." "Adeline." "No," Anton struggled against his restraints. "I have access to my grandmother's inheritance." I continued, walking slowly toward Morrison with my hands visible. $2 million in cash, plus the mineral rights you've been trying to get. Take me instead of Anton. Let him go, and I'll give you everything." Morrison's eyes narrowed with calculation. "The mineral rights alone are worth $50 million once the copper mining starts. Then you know I'm offering you more than the Kozlovs ever could." 60 seconds to international waters. The pilot shouted. Morrison glanced at the countdown timer on the explosives, then at the approaching Coast Guard cutter, then back at me. I could see him weighing his options, trying to find a path through the impossible situation he'd created. "The inheritance accounts require biometric authorization," he said slowly. "Fingerprints, retinal scans. I'd need you alive to access them." "That's right. But if you kill Anton, the deal's off. I'd rather die than help you profit from his murder." Morrison looked at Anton, then at me, then at the timer showing 90 seconds until detonation. For a moment, the only sounds were the boat's engines and the helicopter rotors overhead. Then Morrison made his choice. Morrison's choice wasn't what any of us expected. Instead of accepting my offer or shooting Anton, he turned his weapon toward the explosive device and pulled the trigger. The bullet struck the detonator, but instead of exploding, the device simply went dark. A dud. Remote detonators, Martinez called out, understanding immediately. Someone else has the trigger. Morrison's face went white as he realized he'd been betrayed by his own conspirators. The explosives were never meant to be his insurance policy. They were meant to eliminate him along with all the witnesses. Kevin, Anton said grimly, understanding dawning in his voice. He was never planning to let you reach international waters. Through the radio chatter we heard the Coast Guard cutter's loudspeaker. This is the U.S. Coast Guard. Stop your engines immediately. You are in violation of federal maritime law. But we were still moving, still racing toward the 12-mile limit that was now less than 30 seconds away. Morrison's pilot was following orders from someone other than Morrison. That's when the real explosion came. Not from the deck devices, but from the boat's engine compartment. The Maria Elena lurched violently to starboard as black smoke poured from below decks. Kevin Armstrong had triggered a backup plan that would sink the vessel in international waters, eliminating all evidence of the conspiracy. "Abandon ship," Martinez shouted, already moving toward Anton to cut his restraints. "Hull breach. She's going down fast." Morrison stood frozen in shock as water began rushing across the deck. His carefully orchestrated escape had become his death trap, orchestrated by the same partner he'd trusted to help him disappear. I helped Martinez free Anton from the chair, his hands shaking as circulation returned to his arms. Around us, Morrison's men were abandoning their weapons and grabbing life preservers, their loyalty evaporating as quickly as their chances of survival. "The evidence," Anton gasped, pointing toward Morrison's briefcase. "There's a backup drive in there. Names, dates, bank accounts of everyone involved in the trafficking network." Martinez grabbed the case as the Coast Guard helicopter moved into rescue position above us. The boat was listing heavily now, water pouring through the breach in the hull with terrifying speed. Morrison finally snapped out of his paralysis and lunged for the briefcase, but it was too late. Martinez had already secured it and was helping Anton toward the rescue basket being lowered from the helicopter. "This isn't over," Morrison screamed as the boat continued to sink beneath us. "You have no idea how deep this goes. They'll kill you all before you can testify." But his threats were lost in the sound of rotors and rushing water as the Coast Guard pulled us to safety one by one. Morrison was the last to be rescued, pulled from the water just as the Maria Elena disappeared beneath the waves, taking with it the final remnants of his criminal empire. As we lifted away from the wreckage, I looked down at the oil slick marking where the boat had sunk. Kevin Armstrong's backup plan had backfired spectacularly. Instead of destroying the evidence, he'd handed the FBI everything they needed on a silver platter. The conspiracy was finally over, but our new life was just beginning. 6 months later, I stood in the renovated kitchen of our new home in Vermont, watching through the window as Anton worked in the garden he'd started planting the day we moved in. The morning sun caught the silver in his hair, silver that had appeared during those terrifying weeks when the world thought he was dead. Some changes, I'd learned, couldn't be undone, but some changes were for the better. The trials had been swift and decisive. Morrison received life without parole for conspiracy, murder, and human trafficking. Kevin Armstrong got 25 years after agreeing to testify against the broader network. The backup drive Morrison had carried contained evidence that led to the arrest of 17 additional conspirators, including 2 federal judges and a senator who'd been facilitating the trafficking operation. Genevieve, whose real name was Sophia Collins, had given birth to a healthy daughter 3 weeks ago. She and her husband visited last month, and I'd held little Elena while Sophia told us about her new assignment with the FBI's Human Trafficking Task Force. "Some undercover operations," she said, "change you in ways you never expect." "Coffee's ready," Anton called from the back door, and I realized I'd been lost in thought again. It happened sometimes, moments when the weight of everything we'd survived would settle over me like a familiar blanket. He handed me a mug, the same green ceramic one I'd drunk from during our first morning in this house. "Penny for your thoughts. Just thinking about how different everything is now." Anton followed my gaze toward the garden, where tomatoes were beginning to ripen on the vine. "Do you miss it? The old life?" I considered the question seriously. Did I miss the Victorian house in Millbrook Heights? The predictable routine of our marriage before everything unraveled? The comfortable illusion that I knew who my husband really was? "No," I said finally. "I miss who I thought we were, but I prefer who we actually are." Anton nodded, understanding exactly what I meant. The man who'd faked his death to protect me wasn't the same person I'd married 15 years ago. But then again, the woman who'd rappelled onto a boat to save him wasn't the same person who'd accepted his excuses about working late without question. My phone buzzed with a text from Deputy Director Chen. "Final court appearance for the Kozlov case next Tuesday. Need you both there for the sentencing." It would be the last official act in the case that had torn apart our old life and built our new one. After that, we'd be free to disappear into the quiet anonymity we'd both come to treasure. "Ready for one more courtroom?" Anton asked, reading the message over my shoulder. "Ready for it to be the last one." He pulled me close, and I breathed in the scent of garden soil and coffee, morning sun and new beginnings. Outside, a cardinal landed on the fence post, its red feathers brilliant against the green Vermont landscape. Some secrets, I'd learned, destroy everything they touch, but others, like the strength you discover when your world falls apart, can build something better than what came before. "What should we plant next?" Anton asked, looking toward the empty corner of the garden. "Surprise me," I said, and meant it. 2 years after the trials ended, I found myself back in Millbrook Heights for the first time since we'd fled. The Victorian house looked smaller than I remembered, its cheerful yellow paint now faded and peeling. The new owners had let the garden go wild, and the wraparound porch where I'd once spent peaceful evenings reading was cluttered with children's toys and forgotten lawn furniture. I wasn't there for nostalgia. I was there to deliver something that had taken me months to write. The law office of Brennan and Associates occupied the same building where Mrs. Keller had once practiced before her retirement. The new attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Jessica Brennan, had agreed to handle the legal formalities of what I'd come to think of as my final act in the Denver case. "Are you certain about this?" she asked, reviewing the documents spread across her conference table. "Once this trust is established, you can't change the terms." "I'm certain." The Elena Morrison Foundation, named for Sophia's daughter, would provide legal assistance and counseling services to trafficking victims and their families. The funding came from my grandmother's inheritance, the mineral rights that Morrison had killed for, and the reward money the FBI had provided for our cooperation in bringing down the trafficking network. But the real heart of the foundation was the letter I'd written to be read at the opening ceremony, a letter that had taken me 2 years to find the courage to write, to those who have survived what should have destroyed you. My name is Adeline Denver. 2 years ago, I discovered that my husband had faked his own death to protect me from people who wanted to use me to steal everything I owned. I discovered that the life I thought I was living was a carefully constructed lie, and that the man I'd been married to for 15 years was both a stranger and the most honest person I'd ever known. I learned that sometimes the people sworn to protect us are the ones who hurt us most. I learned that sometimes the truth is more complicated than any lie, and that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's what you do when fear is all you have left. But most importantly, I learned that survival isn't about returning to who you were before. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be. If you're reading this, you've survived something that was meant to break you. You found the strength to seek help, to trust again, to believe that your story doesn't end with what was done to you. This foundation exists because broken things can be rebuilt stronger than they were before. Because secrets lose their power when they're brought into the light. And because sometimes the most beautiful gardens grow in soil that was once poisoned. You are not alone, you are not forgotten. And your story is not over. With hope and solidarity, Adeline Denver, I signed the final papers establishing the trust, knowing that this was how our story should end, not with revenge or justice, but with the quiet determination to ensure that other people's stories might have different endings. Outside, Vermont was waiting. Anton was waiting. Our real life was waiting. And for the first time in years, I was ready to live it.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.